Well, good evening. This is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 21st of November. And I have three little interesting stories that I picked up on the internet just lately. And the first one is about Sears, which of course is now bankrupt and basically in its absolute death throes, and the absolute disgusting way in which it's been treating its workers. Well, not all of the workers. Also, there is a story about hate crimes in England not so long ago. They created a offence called a hate crime, and they have been inundated with calls ever since, and there's been some pretty bizarre calls going on. And the last story is about the Vostok ice core samples and about 480,000 years of data that came out of those cores. So let's get right over to those clips, and I'll do a little commentary as we go, and then I'll come back and finish up. Okay, so let's take a look. And here we go. First story. Bankrupt Sears wants to give executives up to 25 million in bonuses. This is absolutely obscene. New York, CNN Business. Sears is seeking court approval to pay executives as much as 25 million in annual bonuses whilst the company struggles to restructure in bankruptcy. Three top executives could get nearly $1 million each if the company goes out of business. If Sears remains in business, they could get nearly $500,000 each for hitting the top performance targets. Sears filed two different types of bonus plans in bankruptcy court Thursday. The first is for the top 18 key executives, who would collectively get as much as $2.1 million per quarter, up to a maximum of $8.5 million. The bonus would only be paid in full if Sears reaches its cash flow targets. Sears Holdings, which includes both Sears and Kmart, has been burning through cash at a rate of about $125 million a month. A second retention bonus plan was designed to encourage 322 other unnamed executives to stay put during Sears reorganization. They would collectively get $16.9 million over the course of a year, which works out to an average of about $52,000 annually per executive. No executive could receive more than $150,000 in bonuses for staying with the company during the bankruptcy process. A judge's approval is needed before the bonuses could be paid. A hearing on the plans is set for December the 20th. And here is Sheila Brewer, who worked for 17 years as a full-time hourly employee at Kmart in Rockford, Illinois. Said the company told her she'd get 8 weeks of severance. Instead, she received a letter saying that severance payments were being halted because of the bankruptcy, and she would get only the 4 weeks of pay she had already received. It hit me hard. I was already struggling as it was, she said. She said the bonus plan makes her angry. They say we can't get our severance because there's no money, but they're getting bonuses. It's like a slap in the face, she said. Now, this is down in the States, I will agree, but a similar thing happened in Canada. There were hundreds of people lost their jobs when Sears went out of business, went bankrupt, and they all got the same story. No pensions, no severances, no nothing, just see you later, Charlie. Okay, here we are, the Goldwater. UK dog accused of hate crime for defecating on victim's lawn. No one likes walking to the car or to the front door and feeling that squishy, sticky poo on the bottom of your shoe. But is it a hate crime for your dog to poop on someone's yard? That is what courts are trying to figure out in the UK after a victim reported a dog had defecated on her lawn as a racist hate crime. What might shock you even more is this isn't the only hate crime that Metropolitan Police have been dealing with. There have been over 2,507 alleged hate incidents, according to the Metropolitan Police, in 2015 and 2016 alone. Some of the reports of so-called hate crimes include an envelope being opened and resealed, a motor vehicle accident in which one of the vehicles bore a remembrance poppy, a dispute that started over a line call in a tennis match, a dead rat that was found in somebody's garden. A man was accused of a hate crime for telling library staff that he was campaigning for Brexit. And here he is. Here is the pooch in question. Dog accused of a racist hate crime for pooing outside someone's front door. Tory MP and former Special Constable David Davis said that recording such non-crimes equate to a waste of police time and resources. Davis added, "This is part of the reason that police struggle to investigate serious offences such as home burglaries," he said. "People need to start thinking more carefully before they call the police." A strikingly large number of hate incidents, 2,507 to be exact, were revealed in a special 118-page document that was disclosed due to Freedom of Information laws. The incident was where the pooch pooped on the neighbour's lawn reads, "An unknown dog has fouled outside of a victim's address and victim perceived this to be a racial incident." It gets better, or should I say worse. Another hate crime, including the canine, said the suspect's dog barking at the victim. The fact that the dog was barking was somehow reported as a hate crime. But another report says a victim of racial abuse reported that he believes a letter addressed to him was opened and then resealed before he had collected it at the post office. So here we go, it's going into the wild, wacky world of hate crime. And nothing will end this thing sooner than this kind of nonsense taking place. It just completely diminishes the whole idea of a hate crime. So, yes, be careful what you wish for. Last story. 420,000 years of data suggests global warming is not entirely man-made. The global warming debate is one of the biggest topics of the last few years. It makes its way into the political, financial, environmental, entertainment and social arena. While it appears as though the verdict is in, and we are in fact responsible for recent warming, we must take the time to really look at all the possibilities here. This article is in no way denying that climate change is happening, that we can see. Instead, we are exploring what truly might be causing it, and ultimately what we can do to prepare for a serious climate shift. Okay, so this is about the Vostok ice core samples, and what it shows over the past 1,000 years. The green line here is CO2, the blue line is temperature, and yes, there is definitely a correlation with temperature, but CO2 lags temperature. In other words, temperature goes up, then CO2 goes up, and as soon as it reaches a peak, it starts falling, then CO2 starts falling. So there is a connection, yes, with CO2, but it does not cause climate change. Okay, it does not cause warming. Warming is a cyclic event, and CO2 is just one of these things that go along with the whole event. It's interesting to note that it is believed that there is about 800 billion tonnes of CO2 in the atmosphere, and human activities release about another 27 billion tonnes a year, or 3% of the total. What is important to note is that CO2 in the air dissolves into the ocean, and there is a lot more in the oceans than there is in the atmosphere. CO2 in the oceans is slowly gathered by limestone, chalk and other rocks. More than 100 times the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is locked up in these stones. The White Cliffs of Dover are largely responsible for sequestering CO2. How much CO2 that goes to the ocean versus into the atmosphere is not understood at this point. So regardless of the 3% of total emissions that humanity creates, it is very likely that a large portion of it does not even make it into the atmosphere, even if one were to assume that man is contributing large amounts of CO2 to the atmosphere. It would dissolve in the sea and in turn become limestone without any help from us. CO2 contributes 9% of the greenhouse effect. Industry currently pumps 3% more CO2 into the atmosphere each year, which is only responsible for a total of 0.27% of the greenhouse effect. And you can see in this little graph here, the red part is water vapor, huge, and there's a brilliant documentary by Svenmark called The Great Cloud Mystery. The green is ocean biologic activity, volcanoes, decaying plants activity, animal activity, etc. And the blue is human addition, and this is just like you can barely see it, 0.28%. Okay, if we look to roughly 325,000 years ago, based on the Vostok data above, we see that Earth was at the peak of its warm interglacial period, At that time, global temperature and CO2 levels were higher than they are today. Currently we are again at the peak and near end of a warm interglacial. Based on the cycle, it would suggest that we are heading into another ice age period of cooling where global temperatures will drop and ice ages will again form heavily at the pole. So there you go. Science never ends. And of course I love this little chart. It says exactly the same thing, that CO2 lags temperature. But the interesting thing is this is present day temperature, this black line that stretches across the chart. And this is a 740,000 year chart. Okay, now look how much time we have spent in ice ages or coming out of ice ages, and how little time we spent above the present day temperature. Okay, so we have barely crossed the threshold of the datum line. So I think it clearly indicates that there is more to climate change than meets the eye. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed those. I find it fascinating with the Sears story, and the management getting the bonuses and the workers basically getting the cold shoulder. Now these workers quite often, this isn't the only story. Now I don't think Sears workers were represented by a union, but there are union contracts that have included pensions, but these pensions are unsecured, and I'm sure that the union executives know this, because management pensions are secured. So when a company goes bankrupt, the company is obliged to pay management any severance, any pension that is owed, medical benefits, anything that was promised to them, because it was a secured situation. But the regular worker, it's unsecured, and I cannot for the life of me understand why a lawyer isn't advising these people and saying, hey, this should be part of the contract. Your workers should have a secured pension fund. Because this means anywhere, and if you work for Ford, GM, Chrysler, GE, any of these big corporations, just like Sears, you have an unsecured pension unless you are management. And of course, we really don't need to say too much more about the hate crimes, but the 420,000 years of weather data from the Vostok ice core samples is, I think, a cautionary tale as well as an interesting story, because it reminds us that science is never over. Our learning is continually changing, and I would hasten to say that there are many, many, many things in our past that we absolutely believed and turned out to be absolutely wrong. That we were the centre of the universe, that the sun revolves around us, that we were a flat earth, and people thought we would just fall off the edge if you walked too far in one direction or the other. Many of these things, quantum physics is now changing our whole understanding of how the universe is put together at the quantum level. And so, science is never dead, and I think that's one of the things that's happened, with this whole narrative, is that they're assuming that it's settled science. And it's not settled science. We don't know why these changes occur. That's the truth of the matter. And actually I will link below the documentary Little Ice Age, Big Chill. And all the way through that documentary, it's a very watchable documentary, and it gives you an idea of what kind of weather conditions we are going to be moving into. But all the way through, all of the scientists say they have some ideas. I think that they believe that there are many factors to the way the climate reacts throughout our planet. But, is it the ocean? Is it the sun? We don't exactly know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed those 3 articles. If you did, please like and subscribe below. And I want to thank all of you for leaving the comments that you've been leaving. And thank you for viewing. So So you take care, have a great week, and you stay warm. It's pretty chilly up here in North America. Okay, so this is Hound Dog Steve signing off. You take care, you have a great week, and we'll talk real soon. See you now. Bye.